This is fabulous. I love seeing all of these people from everywhere. Hot Springs, Arkansas. Tyler, glad you're here. Patricia from Manzanar in California. Jocelyn, also Santa Monica in California. Oak Park, Charlene. Great. Wonderful. We've got Columbia, Maryland, San Pedro, California, Midlothian, Illinois, and Aaron from Oak Brook Terrace. We've got another Santa Monica, California. So let's keep those coming on in, but I'm going to move us ahead so we can start the screening soon. I just want to welcome you. I'm Anna Garcia Doyle, and I'm the executive director of the One Earth Film Festival. And this is our virtual screening and discussion, which we hope will present rich opportunities for learning in a brave and safe space for important conversations that matter deeply right now in our country and across the globe. One Earth's 10th season theme is inspiring change. In watching Manzanar Diverted, When Water Becomes Dust, I was inspired by the heart-wrenching story that evolves to hope and healing, but is rooted in twin crimes: the forced removal of the Native American tribes from California's Owens Valley, as well as the forced removal of Japanese Americans across the country for detainment to concentration camps in the Owens Valley. I want to acknowledge the many sponsors and partners who've supported the One Earth's 10th season. We just really couldn't do this work without them. And if your circumstances allow, please donate to support One Earth's nonprofit year-round screening events, youth programs, and more at One Earth Film Festival.
We are thrilled you're with us as One Earth Film Fest celebrates 10 years of inspiring change and utilizes the power of film to spark change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like social justice. The fest has had to adapt to a virtual format, but we strive to stay true to our model. While we're not physically together, we are here together, live, virtually, still able to create community, become aware of issues, engage in dialogue, and be inspired to act. African-American activist Angela Davis said, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world." The stories in our fest films reflect that possibility. Our collective actions will achieve that possibility. Our event will take place in 4 parts. We'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a great discussion after the film. We'll then watch it together. Then afterwards, we'll unpack the film's themes in a facilitated Q&A with our wonderful panelists. Please participate by using the chat to share thoughts, ideas, or questions. We'll end by sharing concrete actions you can take to be part of the solution. These actions come from our panelists and other action partners. As we live current movements and reframe narratives around justice, environment, and bringing innovative, equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we're hopeful for the future. I am grateful to the knowledgeable filmmakers, film subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining this and other fest events. They'll guide discussions to help spark and sustain actions for the protection of our One Earth and for the just treatment of its resources and its people. We've found that shared agreements help keep our conversations safe and respectful. Please observe these agreements when participating. Put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect. Engage your active listening, use I statements, and get comfortable with your own story. Acknowledge Native peoples who came before us in protecting our land. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you're active on social media, tell people this is happening. Amplify these voices and be part of the community we're building here together. The hashtag for the festival is hashtag OEFF2021. Thanks again to all of you for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
Hi, welcome. I'm Susan Lucci. I'll be the discussion facilitator for today. I am a soulful facilitator, and I have facilitated the fest ever since the 2nd year. So this is my favorite week of the year. And I also facilitate hundreds of discussions in my own circle model. We often watch movies, back before COVID, and walk out of the theater without really reflecting on what we've seen, how we felt about it, or what implications it may have for our own lives. So today, the model of our fest is that we will watch the film together, as Anna said, and then have a thought-provoking dialogue sparked by this just powerful film, Manzanar. And we're so fortunate, I think, in this International Women's History Month to have a panel of just really incredible women. So please do stay afterwards and participate through the chat to enrich the dialogue. And I would love, there's so many ways to move to action. And so we'll end on that note as well. So I'm going to briefly introduce today's panelist. I'd like to first welcome Mariko Embrey. She is a member of the Manzanar Committee, and she's the granddaughter of Sue Embrey, who you're going to meet in this film and be inspired by, I know, as well. So Monica, thanks for joining us today. I also like to welcome in Kathy Jefferson Bancroft. She's joining us as part of the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and is going to be just adding her wisdom and experience to the discussion. So thanks for being here, Kathy. And now it's my pleasure to bring in our Emmy Award-winning director, Anne Koneko, the director of Manzanar Diverted, When Water Becomes Dust. And she's going to actually introduce us to her powerful film. Anne.
This film I've been working on for many years. It's been over 5 years in the process of making. But this film is an intersectional approach to Manzanar and really looking at Paiute-Shoshone, or the Owens Valley, which is where Manzanar is situated, and it looks at 3 different communities: the Native American, the environmentalists, many of whom were ranchers and farmers in the area, and the Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II there. So anyway, I hope you enjoy, and we'll talk more later. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Anne. Great. So now it's time for us to enjoy the film. We'll see you afterwards to engage in conversation with our panelists in the post-film conversation. The film is just under an hour and a half, so I'll see you back here then. Enjoy the film. Great. So you can continue to post your comments, your questions in the chat. Our team will be screening those out for me as I bring the panel in. And I want to introduce them. We're so fortunate today to have not only the director, but also 2 powerful storytellers from the film. So I want to invite in Anne Kaneko. Yay, you're all here. Good. Who's known for her personal films that weave her intimate aesthetic with the complex intricacies of political reality. She poetically probes the intersection where power impacts the personal. Anne's been working on Manzanar Diverted since 2015, and wow, we really benefit from years of effort here. So thanks, Anne, for being with us today. Also like to introduce Monica. Mariko Embrey is the granddaughter of Sue Embrey, who you saw in the film. Monica founded the Manzanar Committee and led the annual Manzanar pilgrimage starting in 1969. There she is, Monica. She's a community organizer who's based in LA, and she follows in her grandmother's footsteps as a member of the Manzanar Committee. So many delicious comments from you in the film, Monica. Can't wait to hear more. Beautiful. And then we also have Kathy. What a panel we have today. Kathy Jefferson Bancroft was born and raised in the traditional homeland of her ancestors. She now serves her community, the Lone Pine Paiute-Shoshone Reservation, as the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. And I can't wait, Kathy, the connection with place is so beautiful in this film. So I can't wait to hear more from you as well. Before we begin, I would just love us to bring a moment of silence to all that were harmed, who died at Manzanar, and then also during the making of the film, and even list in the following credits. So just a moment of silence to hold in our hearts all the ancestors that were lost. Thanks, everybody. So we'll start off. I feel like I could talk to these 3 women for the rest of the day. I have so many questions for them. Just fascinating women. But I also invite you to put your questions and comments in the chat, and I'll weave those in as well. And I'm going to start with you, the director. I'm so grateful for you telling a story that I did not know before I first screened this film several weeks ago. And I'm curious, I know you've made a number of films, but where did the seed of this idea come? Where did you begin?
So, a dear friend of mine invited me on this humanities research team to look at Manzanar um, as kind of a place of intercultural, interfaith connection between communities. And I was sort of like, oh, Manzanar, it's like it has such weighty history because there have been so many amazing films made about Manzanar. And and I also, I think as a Japanese American, I will say that I've always felt like, oh, there's more to my identity than this, just this. I mean, not just this history, but this history. But I kind of hesitated, but I thought, okay, well, what can I find that's different for me, or what resonates for me? And I had this interest in looking at, Japanese American, or the connections between Manzanar and Native American communities. I was aware that the Bureau of Indian Affairs had a real hand in the War Relocations Authority in terms of the administration of the camps. But I was really kind of more curious about that history, and obviously all of these camps across the country were. I mean, we are all on indigenous land, but they had more recent connections to indigenous lands. So um, I think it sort of started with this interest in terms of that, as well as just sort of formation of place and how this camp came to be. And as I began doing research, I really realized that I did not fully understand how Los Angeles got its water. And so when all of these histories really converged in this place, I was like, oh, wow, if I didn't realize that, then I'm sure many other people weren't aware of that. And I mean, I also, Monica had obviously, done all of this research before me, but I sort of came to this idea of making this film before I knew of Monica's um, thesis. But it was sort of like, oh my God, here's somebody who's done this research. So anyway.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I'm sure as a filmmaker, and you have to make so many choices. So I'm curious, was there one person or image or scene or story that you just had to tell? And was there something that just didn't make it to the final cut that you would love to weave in?
Well, so this film is a long time in making. Uh, and there were actually many other characters in the film, any other people who we spoke to, but it became a bit unwieldy. And so we really had to kind of find these core people that could tell this story. And so, there are many, many other people who've shared their stories with us, and many other scenes, but I feel like we've got the main ones. i can't I can't quite think of something that was like, oh, I really needed that. But I just I feel like, oh, there's this expression. It's a terrible expression, when when in terms of filmmaking, and it's like, oh, you have to kill your babies. I mean, it's a horrible expression. I don't really. Probably shouldn't utter it here, but it's just this idea that it's sort of like, well, what serves the story and what serves kind of this overall premise. So I think that there are many kind of tributaries to this story, which I find equally interesting, but there wasn't place because it was, had to sort of stay on this main story. And it's obviously so um, ambitious, trying to kind of tell this panorama of this history. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You seem to have a gift of the weaving and the intersection. I know that's the name of your film company, and the interfaith and that ability to weave it together. One more question for you, and then I'll bring in Monica and Kathy's voices, of course, too. But I noticed you've made a number of films. Many study kind of the coming of age, the youth experience around the world. So I'm just really curious about your own coming of age story. At what point did you know that film was your medium for expression?
I'm still trying to figure that out now. Um, I think that I started out doing photography, actually. So, and I think I studied that during college, but I've always loved writing as well. And I think that filmmaking requires writing. And uh, during the course of making photographs, I just found it to be a very solitary endeavor, and I really wanted to collaborate with people more. And I think one of really the process that I enjoy probably the most about filmmaking is that you are in community with the people who you are making the film with, as you know, and that is in front of and behind the camera. And so I think for me, this medium has been a broadening of my world, in that I've been able to learn and share with so many other people. And so, but I also will say that I really like puzzles, and editing especially is a puzzle in terms of trying to really tell ideas. And I think that, film is a medium which really lends itself to, it's very complex, and it's challenging to try to, share ideas in this way. So, but I like to write. I feel like I'm a creative person. So if it weren't film, it'd be something else.
Beautiful. Thanks, Anne, for that. It reminds me of what Sue Embrey, the quote you weave in at the end, where she says, a sense of camaraderie moved people, right? And I feel you living that out as well. Yeah, thank you so much. Mark has a comment that the history classes he had growing up were not all bad, but there was so much just missing. I agree. And I want to bring in Monica and say thank you for your truth telling and carrying on this legacy. And I want to know, once you made that connection between water and Manzanar, did you go back to your history of water professor and let him know about that? Or was it afterwards?
Yeah. No, yes. And I was so lucky that professor, who's still a dear friend and mentor, actually was my thesis advisor. And so helped me put the pieces together into my thesis, really talking about the forced relocation and removal of people to or from Paiute from the valley in relationship to water. So he has now incorporated that fully into his class, and I actually go back often and guest lecture to his environment classes, which is such a privilege. So it's definitely been incorporated since then.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Yeah, that's really great. I'm glad I asked that. So what does it feel like? Now here we are in 2021 and you're walking in your grandmother's shoes, watching this beautiful film, carrying on her legacy. I also found an interview where you talked about your grandmother Sue spent some time in Chicago. I'd love it if you could share, maybe weaving together a little bit of her finding her voice, learning to speak up and be unquiet, and then for you.
Absolutely. I didn't think about, when I was entering college, was the same age my grandmother was when she was incarcerated at Manzanar. And so the opportunities that were taken from her, she had deep aspirations as a younger person to go to college, and was able to send herself later to time. But I think about the ways in which she navigated. So after leaving Manzanar, she went to the Midwest, because of the intense racism and xenophobia on the West Coast, and the opportunities for her to find work and housing, which many people of Japanese ancestry struggled to find in the months and years after incarceration, because of the intense warmongering and hysteria that was put out in the media against the Japanese American community. There was incredible discrimination that continued well on in the 40s and 50s after the camps closed. And so eventually my grandmother moved back to Los to be closer to her family. And it was a challenge for her as a Nisei, second generation American woman, and the deep intersection of the time that she lived in, her age, her gender, her all had huge impacts on how many people, including her own family members at times, her to not rock the boat. The incredible fear that persisted within the Japanese American community after incarceration because you weren't certain the government wouldn't do it again. You know, many people, including my grandmother, were US citizens, born in the United States, and the constitutional rights were completely taken away, right? To be incarcerated without due process, to be held at gunpoint behind barbed wire. And so really thinking about the ways in which she spoke out and was unquiet, right? Immense and pressure. And that's part of why she connected with so many other people, including Warren Furatani and many other Sanse in the generation, who were eager to learn, but here able to tell the stories herself about what it meant to persist and resist in these times.
Beautiful. Thanks, Monica. Appreciate that. Margaret has a comment saying it's so important to remember and document history for future generations, that we don't let the truth die with the people who lived it. With that, I would love to bring in Kathy. Oh my gosh, Kathy, we hear your voice at the beginning of this film and throughout it. You've seen a lot. I feel like you hold so much. And that you've paid a price. It's taken such a toll on your body as you reflect in the film. So I think for me in the film too, you help me really connect to the place and a sense of place, and thinking about those mountains having a story. So I'd just love to bring in your voice, Kathy. How do you continue this thread of remembering so the ploy does not succeed?
I grew up, the stories of, oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I was going to say, I've grown up, in this place, hearing the stories of the past, recent past and long time ago. I was really close with my grandmother who just relayed these stories to me, and they were fun when I was a younger person. But then as I got older, I realized the importance of those stories. And when you grow up in a place and then you're forced to leave, went away to school. And the more time I spent away from this place, the more I grew to appreciate it. And that has a lot to do with it. Plus, I came home from school, and in 2002, I came home from grad school and just haven't ever had any reason to live and leave. And even though I was always here off and on, it became apparent that if we didn't start speaking up, there was going to be a lot of destruction. And I had friends who said, you need to tell your story, come out and make those, bring attention to this so that you have help. And I said, but I don't want people to know about this. But I learned that that's the way to really get help, is you can't do it yourself. And so that's why I really appreciate people like Anne and others who have really helped us in acknowledging the importance of this place and how people are treating it. And that's the thing, is that I have seen change, in the recent years. And I said, as long as we're going towards the better, I'll be happy for that, but we'll keep going, we'll keep trying. And so hopefully one of these days we can actually get things restored to more of a balance around here. That's my motivation.
Oh, beautiful. Yes, I love that. Thank you, Kathy. That's so beautiful. Such beautiful theme and thread already, even our conversation here about connecting with other people and thinking about organizing and knowing that part of the motivation of the Film Fest here is to move us to take action, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I want to invite each of you in. I'm not sure activist is a word that each of you, any of us, claim. But thinking about, even when I read Anne's bio about weaving together the personal and the political, I'd love to hear a little bit from each of you about, do you consider yourself an activist? If so, when did you first become? We hear a little bit of Kathy's motivation there. I'm also concerned how you sustain that. I think it can be overwhelming. These stories are really heavy and even physically to hold. So just interested to stir around activism and whatever that sparks for each of you. Why don't we start with Anne and then go to Monica and Kathy?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm an activist with a capital A, but I am a filmmaker, and I know that filmmaking is a very powerful platform. And I do feel like the films that I make can help to bring conversation and awareness and education to these really important issues. So, and I think that that's ultimately what attracted me to filmmaking. It's to be able to share the perspectives of that I find compelling and interesting and important that aren't in the mainstream usually, right? I think that I teach media studies, and it's also I think for especially women, people of color, for all of us, it's like being able to use the media to represent ourselves and tell our own stories is really important. And so I think that that is part of what I try to do with films, and I think that it's also to help encourage uh, conversation and awareness and change. I won't pretend that a film will change anybody, but I do feel like that if hopefully it'll help open people to be able to think more deeply and be more critical. So
Absolutely. And
yes,
we've already heard my personal story and a number of comments in the chat are saying, I didn't know, right? So already you are awakening us to stories we did not know. Yeah, Monica,
I will.
what would you say?
Can I just add
Oh,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing? I just also will say that I think, my parents as Japanese Americans who were incarcerated in World War II, and my grandparents, that that idea of social justice and of trying to make the world a better place is embedded in who I am and who I grew up to be. So I think that for many of us who share that history is important. So I think now that as I've grown older, I think I've learned to embrace that. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, it's important. Really important point. Thank you for adding that. Great.
Yes, thank you.
Monica.
Yeah, so I mean, as you all learned, advocating for justice is very much in my family with my father and my grandmother. And I would identify, yes, as an activist, but also as an organizer. And I would distinguish that an activist is an individual who's taking action to make change. Organizer is someone who is coming together to build power and community with others. I really did learn that from my grandmother and my father, and watching and learning their organizing and activism. It was critical that my grandmother find other voices with whom to advocate to make her a National Historic Site. She was not able to do that on our own. No one is able to make the changes we need to on our own. And I have the incredible honor and privilege of being a professional activist. I actually currently work at the Sierra Club. I'm a national associate director and help lead teams across California to help address climate crisis and environmental justice. And when I think about challenges as large as climate change, is also why I think it's important that I advocate not as myself, but with others as an organizer, because I don't think we'll be able to reach the scale of change that we need unless we bring together many, many different communities to fight for that change. And whether that was the most recent fight that we did with Kathy and many others in the Paiute tribe, as well as the Owens Valley Committee to help Solar Ranch or other fights, it really does take everyone coming together to make that difference. And so, yes, I'm an activist, but I'm also an organizer. And being in community with others is what sustains me to be able to do this year after year. I think about the fact that my grandmother helped start the pilgrimages in 1969, but didn't get to cut the ribbon on Manzanar until 1992. And so it takes decades of advocacy and fighting for justice, and the perseverance that she maintained to not give up and to keep fighting. I think in part she was able to do that by being in community with so many others. And that's what it takes for us to win.
Beautiful. Thanks, Monica. Awesome. We have three fabulous teachers here as well. So I feel like I'm in school. It's awesome. All right, Kathy.
I have never thought of myself as an advocate, and it was funny because lately I've been hearing that, and I was like, I mean, as an activist, and to me that sounded funny because I've never thought of myself as somebody who gets out there, and really fights and stuff. Um, but I've come to kind of accept that, and I guess I think more of myself more as an educator because I feel like to change things, you got to get other people to understand your point of view, how you see things, and that's kind of my goal lately. When like Monica was talking about climate change or anything, um, even if I'm not fighting for a specific cause, is to educate people on the indigenous perspective and indigenous ways of being a caretaker, being one of the people. For thousands of years, we took care of this place, and outsiders have only come back and been here 150 years, and they've just taken and taken and they don't see anything wrong with that. And to me, that is the problem. And but I think if people um, knew the story, like this story told in this movie, that's the place to start because it's you're not inventing the wheel. This has been around. This knowledge has been around how to protect a place. People just don't know. And that's kind of what I feel my role is. And if it helps, if not, I'll find another way to help. But we need land, and the land needs us to take care of it. So that's why I'm here. Thanks.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And I see that I hold the term activist as somebody who takes action motivated by what they deeply care about. And I really hear that in each of your shares. And I think, Kathy, you're still on the screen, so I'll ask you too about your call in the film for responsibility. If we were each responsible for the water, right? And if we each had this attitude of like you're talking about stewardship, right, that you bring down from thousands of years of memory that you hold. So I hear you also teaching around that too. So if there's anything else you'd like to emphasize there around the role, I see you in that scene with all the young people, and I think about what stories you're telling them.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because they talk about water rights, and only certain people have water rights, like LADWP and a handful of people around here. And I have a friend who fought hard and received a water right in LA, and she doesn't call it a water right. Everybody has a right to water. She calls it a water responsibility. She's responsible for that water to see that it is used by the community and goes back to the land. And I think that's the most important thing right there.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Lots of comments in our chat about the interconnectedness of water, the bubbling creek that was up, the importance of maintaining contact with nature. And I'm sorry, I think we're having a little tech difficulty. So we'll tolerate that. Great. So again, to all three of you, the topic of reparations that Anne addresses in the film is now another conversation we're having in America right now as well with a different group of folks. But in the film, there's the grant of $20,000, the apology, there's the commitment to public education that to ensure this would never happen again. I'd love to hear from each of you about that. Was that enough? And is there any guidance, any learning in this story that we can apply today to the conversation about reparations. So Monica, why don't you kick us off with that one, if you don't mind? Let's see, you're muted. Sorry.
Can you? No?
Now I can hear you. Now I can.
Okay. Great. So my grandmother and many years advocated for redress and reparations for many years. And the $20,000, I mean, how do you put a dollar amount on the intergenerational trauma, let alone the actual seizing of financial assets, right? My family lost our store, lost their homes, lost their bank accounts, lost their belongings, but also their sense of place in this country. And so I don't know if there's ever going to be a specific dollar that will adequately repair that harm. And financial restitution is a critical component, which is part of why the Manzanar Committee supports and endorses HR 40, which is a federal bill reparations for people of African ancestry in the United States. And we absolutely believe that because of the intergenerational harms and traumas that are the founding of this country, we need to pay that restitution and do the reparations. And so absolutely support the call for reparations for Black Americans today.
Thanks, Monica. Perfect. Yeah, I've been doing some advocacy myself on that bill. Anne, would you add anything about this concept of reparations and as you wove it in so beautifully to the film?
I mean, I echo what I think Monica says. It's really, how do you quantify something like that? But it's an acknowledgement, and it's a public acknowledgement, and that money is, does mean something. So I mean, I agree, and I think that that's something that this country, that legacy is something that this country definitely needs to come to terms with. So, but I mean, it's money. Yeah, I mean, I think for my mother, for example, she got her $20,000, and she donated most of that money to other organizations to create more education around these issues. So I think for her, it's just that I think that what is echoed in the Japanese American community is never again. And so I think that's why so many Japanese Americans have been very outspoken about standing up for injustices that are, parallel what has happened to Japanese Americans. So I think that kind of awareness and action has to keep happening, and recognize our past so that we can move forward.
Absolutely. Right. And I'm just that commitment to the education, have we learned given the events of the last few years, especially? Yeah, it continues. Great. Thanks, Anne. Kathy, love to get your voice in on the reparations point.
I really hesitate when you're talking about the financial part of reparations, because I feel that too many people see that as, okay, we're paid off. We've done our part. We're even now. And I don't see that as the case. This is something that's affected us for generations. There's too many aspects of it, the land, the water, education that people need to know to understand what actually happened, and accept the genocide in this country, and realize why people are the way they are, know the true stories of these histories of these people, what has happened to all the different tribes. And I think that's way more valuable than what any financial, what per capita, giving that to individuals is going to do. And I believe, that if they gave it to tribal organizations and stuff to help tribes and help people understand, is going to be way more effective in our case, because it's a little different story. That it's not just a one time, so many years, it's a hundreds of years history. So I think it's going to take a little more than writing a check.
Yeah, I really respect that. A few more comments just to weave in. Richard says, glad the solar farm idea was defeated. Mary says, bravo, women. And on that note, I will move us to our action piece here. And I love that last comment. Bravo, women! Tomorrow's International Women's Day, and wow, Anne, I lost count of how many female truth tellers you weave in here. I'm not sure I've seen a film that has so many female truth tellers. So, bravo, women! Absolutely. Great. So let's move into the what actions would we recommend. We're thinking individually. Obviously, the theme of this conversation in this film is collectively, right? Moving into that sense of camaraderie and organizing, as Monica defines so beautifully for us. So turning to action, how can we be part of the solution? So let's, I was just seeing where they're putting up the slide there. Okay, great. So yes, and we will also follow up for all folks that are watching along with us. You will have an email follow-up with all of these different action ideas and more, and different resources that will come along with the transcript of the chat and whatnot. So let's see if I can see some of these. And okay, now they're tuning in. Great. So love that. Connect with nature, be with nature, get outside. I find that to be among the most healing ways to maneuver these days. And certainly Kathy embodies and inspires that for us. Live lightly on the earth, reduce your carbon footprint, learn about climate justice, clean up a contaminated site. Drawdown is a great resource for this. Moving around, use your voice. And I'd love to get the three of you, your voices in, what you like to recommend to folks. And the last box we have is communicate and learn. But let's bring back our panel. I think they'll get to see the slides, but what would each of you like to recommend for a take action following this moment, this film? Yeah, Monica, let's start with you. I can't hear you. Let's see. Is that on her end? There you go.
No?
Yeah, start over. Thanks.
Sure. So I think the main thing I would say is to get actively involved with others in your community. There are so many groups that allow for opportunities to different efforts. So no matter what issue it is that you care about, with others to form, our voices are so much stronger when we are together and making collective calls for change. So if climate change and mental justice issues happen to be of interest, the Sierra Club has a chapter in every community, and so definitely would urge you to join us there. But there are so many organizations on so many issues, and so really it is the call to join with others to make a difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'd just like to underscore that what you said, something you care about and what's in your community right in front of you. I think those put us in a sweet spot of our ability to and to sustain the motivation that is needed to keep acting. Kathy, what do you recommend?
Like I've already said, and I continue to say, is educate yourself. You saw how many people have expressed that they didn't know about this issue, or at least they learned more than they thought they knew. And that I see that every day, even though I live it every day. I'm always amazed that there are people who have not heard of it. So not educate yourself, but also educate your friends. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Get it across. And there are so many indigenous issues today in this world. Learn about Oak Flats. Learn about the Dakota Access Pipeline issue, Line 3. There are so many issues, and we all need support, and that's how you can help, is get involved.
Awesome. And we'll have some resources to share. I think there's a quote towards the end of the film. I can't remember if it's you, Kathy, or someone else. I'm going to attribute it to you right now. If we can be appreciative and aware, a change can be made. And I love that, the awareness and also that appreciation, again, to the heart space, that gratitude for our water. Anne.
Well, I totally agree with, Kathy and Monica. It is about activating yourself. And I think, and that can be in many different ways. So I feel like, embrace that side of you, but we all need to join together for, spread the word on this film. That will be one thing you can do where we continue to show the film, and we will eventually have a PBS broadcast. So, and we have a very ambitious impact plan for this film. So we will be taking it out. So, that's one thing that you can do if you've been moved by this film. But there are so many, many other things that you can do. And we're building out our website, which will really be a great resource for, contacting other organizations around these issues as well. So thank you.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. Somebody's put that link in the chat, which is great. I can see. Yeah, so that's wonderful. Well, a deep bow of gratitude to each of you for being present, for all that you do, for all of us out in the world. And I'd love to just give you each, a minute to close out or so, if you just have some final thoughts. But mine to each of you is gratitude. So, Kathy, why don't we start with you and then go to Monica and Ann?
I just want to thank you guys for hosting this film. I want to thank Ann for being so persistent. I interviewed with her once, and I thought, that's over. And she kept coming back, and we built a great relationship. And to see what this film can do is just amazing. I just want to thank everybody.
She kept coming back. That's awesome. Perseverance. I love that, Kathy. Not one and done. Oh, great. The fierce feminine, right? Monica.
Again, big thanks to everyone for tuning in today, from One Earth for hosting us, and absolutely to Ann and Kathy for all of your work. I will leave you with a phrase from my grandmother, which in Japanese says, "Nidoto nai yoni," which means let it never happen again. And so let's make sure we continue to come together and ensure all communities are protected and safe and welcomed in this country and beyond all of our borders. And so just thank you for your work, for your activism, for your organizing, and for helping protect all peoples and our planet.
Thank you, Monica. That's beautiful. Thank you. Ann, we'll give you the final word for the panel here. Thank you so much again for your beautiful film.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate this platform to be able to share the film. And obviously, thank you to Monica and Kathy. I feel like, my family has grown. And to everyone out there, since I know that there are many in the audience who have been supporters of the film and who have worked on the film. So thank you all, since this has been a huge endeavor, trying to especially realize this film in the midst of a pandemic. So, but I will say that I think that, we are in the, we are hopefully coming out of this pandemic and this time, which has been very challenging for many people. And it's probably, well, I know it's magnified many of the inequities and the things in our society that really need working on. And so I hope that this film gives pause to think about, where we've been, and not just this last year, but for many, many years in the past, and where we can go in the future, because ultimately we can't change this world unless we reach out and try to do it together. So thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Ann. Really appreciate you. Great. So could we have the slide up with the resources one more time? Garen, thank you. And as we close out, I hope that you all feel a sense of our theme this year for our 10th annual One Earth Film Festival. It's inspiring change. So hopefully you've heard different whispers and sparks and even calls, urgent calls throughout the film and the discussion, how we can come together, as Anne just told us, in community around these critical issues. So could you please enter into the chat how you are ready to take action, what you might be willing to do to make and inspire change? What do you feel compelled to do as a result of spending these few hours together? And then I'll go ahead and shout some of them out to all of us as we do continue to inspire each other. Yeah, that bill, thanks Monica, is HR 40 for reparations. There's lots of advocacy you can do around that. Third, take action. Understand the value of maintaining contact with nature. You could get outside right now today, fall in love again, reconnect. Great. Vicky is saying she'll join the Sierra Club. I love that. Every community. Thank you, Sierra. And thanks, Vicky. You'll have another member today, Monica. Okay, thanks, Julie. She's going to write to our senators in Illinois about the bill. Thank you so much. Great. We have let's see, Edith is going to show the film in a leadership and water management course at UCLA that she teaches. Thank you. Telling my water engineer coworkers about this. Continue to be an annoying inclusion and diversity advocate. Thanks, Kim. We could spread this story. Stop buying almonds. I love them, but they are water hogs to grow. Thanks, Jody. Pushing coal ash cleanup in Illinois. Thanks so much, Mary. Great. So hopefully you feel ready to make and inspire change. If you'd like to learn more about our panelists and stay in touch with their work, we're going to put up some slides, some links here. I encourage you to remember to tweet, post, and share what you just experienced. When it's alive right now is the best time to tell the story. This is such a powerful film of storytellers. So please do use your voice and spread this amazing story. We love donations. We are an entirely, a volunteer group here. We would love some support from you if you are able to contribute. The link is down there. And a huge thanks to everybody, to all of you for showing up, for your commitment and your care. I also want to thank our amazing team behind the scenes here that makes this easy for me to just show up and look at all these screens. And we hope to see you again. We are mid-fest and there are plenty more films to watch. So I'd like to invite you to view another screening through next Sunday. So another week. Beautiful. So here are the links. You have your resources. Let me just zip over to the chat log really quick. Let's see if there's some more action items. Changing to oat milk from almond milk. Thanks, Vicky. Terry's going to listen more deeply and take action. Love it. Let's see. In Illinois, Mary's going to call the governor to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act. Thanks, Mary. Great. And Anne is telling us that they're fundraising to execute an impact campaign. So you can see more there. We got some gratitude in the chat. Beautiful. And you can all see that. You'll receive a copy of the chat, the discussion, the links, and everything will come to you in an email thanks to the brilliant team of One Earth Film Fest. So I think that is everything that I need to mention for today. Thanks again for spending your afternoon or evening or morning with us. And I hope we'll see you at another Film Fest event. So be well.